Hi, this is Mike Regan. In December of last year, we posted an on-the-record video interview that we conducted with Bob Voltmann, who is the CEO of the Transportation Intermediaries Association. Having been on the board of TIA for several years, I can tell you that Bob Voltmann, in my mind, is one of the most articulate, well-informed individuals in understanding the critical issues that brokers, intermediaries, and third parties face on a daily basis. And that's why I'm proud to be a member of the Transportation Intermediaries Association. Now, after we posted this interview on YouTube, an individual, James Lamb, who represents a small trade association called the AIPBA, started posting comments that he thought that in the interview there were some factual inaccuracies and thought that we were intentionally trying to spread these inaccuracies through the video. Well, we also learned from our listeners that there was a problem with the video after we posted it. It cut out after about 14 to 15 minutes. So we took down the interview so that we could put up the entire interview for all of our listeners to consider. Well, that really upset Mr. Lamb, and he posted on some YouTube links and went up on LinkedIn saying that there was some nefarious reason why we took down the interview. Well, folks, the only reason we took down the interview is because we wanted to make sure that the interview in its entirety was up and running on the YouTube. Now, that still wasn't good enough for Mr. Lamb, and so he sent me a cease and desist letter that he himself authored. Now, frankly, I don't know whether Mr. Lamb's an attorney, but I do know that we sent his cease and desist letter to our attorney, who called me up and was laughing. He said it was absolutely farcical. Now, that shouldn't surprise anyone who's followed Mr. Lamb's rantings and ravings over the past 2 years against Bob Voltmann and the TIA. A lot of what he does is comical and farcical. And that's why we need to pray for Mr. Lamb. Pray that he starts to get a grip on the key issues that brokers of any size have to deal with. Now, in particular, one of the things he's really upset about is the legislation that the TIA worked on along with OIDA, which in essence raised the broker bond requirements from $10,000 to $75,000. In Mr. Lamb's eyes, this is going to really hurt the small brokers and drive a lot of them out of business. Well, as somebody who tracked the progress on that legislation, there are a whole host of issues that Mr. Lamb chose to close his eyes to. And once again, his comments were, in our opinion, misinformed and failed to understand exactly what was going on. So with the legislation that OIDA wanted to push that would have affected disclosure of fuel surcharge and other things, the TIA worked effectively with OIDA to reach a compromise that everyone can live with. Everyone except Mr. Lamb. So we took down the interview after Mr. Lamb sent his letter because we wanted to make sure that we put this introduction to what you're about to listen to up on YouTube. Now, we hope after you listen to it, you'll understand that the things that Bob's talking about, some of them are conceptual issues. And that's why we also want to encourage any one of you that's a transportation intermediary, a third party or broker, to consider joining the best industry association for representing your interest. And that would be the Transportation Intermediaries Association. And for those members that are part of AIPBA, I want to say, take a look at what your executive director is doing. The manner in which he conveys information and the threats and accusation he makes are below the dignity of any representative association. And we also want to pass along a personal message. We live in the United States of America, the greatest country in the world. And one of the reasons this is such a great country is because we all have the First Amendment rights, the freedom of speech. So if Mr. Lamb wants to continue threatening, or sending intimidating letters, or threatening notes, or posting continued rants and raves on YouTube and LinkedIn, go ahead. But we want to make sure that everyone understands that we will proudly continue to host this link on our TranzAct website. And I believe TIA will continue to host a link. And if Mr. Lamb wants to continue to host a link on his website, he can continue to do so. But now you know the real facts about what's going on, and you also know why if you're an intermediary, third party, or broker, you should join the Transportation Intermediaries Association. Thanks for your time and enjoy the video interview. Hi, this is Mike Regan, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this video edition on the record. And we're honored to have Bob Voltmann, who is the CEO of the Transportation Intermediaries Association. And the Transportation Intermediaries Association is the preeminent organization representing third parties. I had the privilege and opportunity to serve on the board of directors and the executive committee with Bob, and he has done an outstanding job in helping position the third-party industry for some very interesting times. So Bob, I'd like to welcome you and welcome you to TranzAct, and you're now on the record with us.
Thanks, Mike. It's a great honor to be here.
Okay.
You're a good friend of the industry, and I appreciate it.
Great. Let's dive right in. You know, let's talk about 2013. It's one of the things that I've been talking about on the 2-minute warnings and all, that shippers are going to have a very, very interesting time in 2013 because of some of the challenges. You represent well over 1,000 third parties and all. Can you give us your insights when you look out into the future, what you're seeing?
Sure, Mike. Besides the fiscal cliff that we all keep hearing about, 2013 brings 27 new rulemakings from the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. MAP 21, the transportation bill that Congress passed last summer, contained these 27 rulemakings that the agency has to complete by October 1 of 2013. These are going to bring a lot of reforms and changes to the transportation industry. It will bring new requirements for third parties, for trucking companies. It will phase out MC numbers and replace them with DOT numbers based on individual authorities. Then you couple that with hours of service rules that the court will rule on. EOBR is coming in 2014. A number of changes are coming.
Well, let's take a step back, if I might. You know, when we get together, you know, it's easy to say FMCSA, and we start talking and all. Like I was at the Pentagon once for a briefing there, and they had initials for everything, and I was so confused. And so let's take a step back. The average shipper, who is the FMCSA, and why should they take an interest in what the FMCSA is doing?
Yeah, excellent. Will Rogers once said that you can take any 3 letters and put them together and come up with an annoying federal agency or program. FMCSA is the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. It was created by Congress to deal with motor carrier safety. It is the licensing body for motor carriers, brokers, and freight forwarders. Okay.
And why is the FMCSA so important? When you say it's the licensing body, it's part of the Department of Transportation. And through the FMCSA, there are rules and regulations, basically the playbook, through which the trucking industry has to play and shippers has to play, is put out and maintained by the FMCSA. So when you say there are 27 rule-making things that are coming as a result of the highway bill that was passed in July of this past year, as a shipper, what's the big deal? Why should I be concerned?
Well, there are a number of things that are in there. It will change the game, how you get into the industry.
As a third party?
Well, and even as a motor carrier. There is now a qualified individual requirement. So to get a license as either a motor carrier or a third party from FMCSA, you're going to have an officer of the company with 3 years of industry experience. We think this is a good thing. It's going to help make everybody in the game know what they're doing ahead of time and have some experience. It raises the financial requirements for brokers and freight forwarders and institutes a $75,000 bond. Again, we think this is a good thing. It will help raise the bar and add more security to shippers. Some third parties through our membership have also had voluntarily increased their financial responsibility to as high as $250,000. The new rules also require the third parties, just like motor carriers, to every couple of years renew their license.
Okay.
Motor carriers have had to do this for years. This is a new thing for third parties. But again, we think it helps shippers by giving them more comfort.
Well, let's take a step back then, and because one of the things we have talked about, we had a discussion on some of our 2-minute warnings about the fact that shippers really need to know who they're doing business with.
Absolutely.
So it sounds like these regulations, some of the things that you're talking about here, are actually constructive in terms of helping shippers or giving them additional tools that they can look at if they want to understand who it is they're doing business with.
Well, it's essential. I've heard you talk about this. You have to know who you're doing business with. You don't sign contracts. You don't shouldn't be entering into transportation transactions without knowing who the parties are. But too many people do this. It's easy to check on the validity of the motor carrier, the third party involved in the transaction, either through the FMCSA website or private services. It's essential that you know who you're doing business with. These products will help. And one of the things about the qualified individual requirement that's exciting as we go forward is we're going to be able to build a database of who these qualified individuals are. There are some fraudulent players in the marketplace, and this is going to make it easier to track those people.
Okay, let's go forward a little bit. You know, you mentioned, for example, EOBRs, and that for our audience is electronic on-board recorders that are installed on the rigs, and basically controls a lot of data and helps the trucking companies understand how the rigs are being driven and the speeds at which they're being driven, and a whole wealth of information. You and I last week, I think, were a little bit surprised when we were at the Chicago Traffic Club when the gentleman from CRST told us how much of a hit the hours of service rules will have on productivity, anywhere from 7% for tandem drivers up to, I think he said 9 to 12% for single drivers. We have talked with several other carriers and have learned that they are taking a look, this half-hour stop rule, for example, and the consecutive 1 to 5 a.m. Periods and the restart. Are you at all concerned that we may see a capacity crisis? You know, you put on electronic on-board recorders. I think OIDA, which is the Owner-Operator Independent Driver Association, has said that's going to have a hit to productivity. Are you concerned that shippers may get to a point where they are not going to be able to find a truck at a reasonable price to move the freight?
Oh, absolutely. We went into the recession with a driver shortage. We've come out of the recession with a driver shortage. That hasn't changed. The average driver is now 54 years old. The demographics don't look good. We have to find new ways of attracting new pools of people to drive trucks. And this is a problem that we see in talking to my counterparts around the world. The Europeans face the same issue. The Australians face the same issue. In every economy based on trucking, they face the same thing. But back here, back to your point, the hours of service rule will have an effect. You've talked to a number of trucking companies. We talk to our members with trucks. It will have a significant, measurable impact. EOBRs, we've seen the reports. EOBRs have a 3/4 negative productivity graph.
You've mentioned that before. When you say a 3/4 negative productivity, you're saying that for 3 consecutive fiscal quarters, it has a negative impact on productivity.
Correct.
Okay.
Before it begins to come back to positive, and then in about the 5th quarter, an EOBR actually adds efficiency to the trucking operation.
Is that because trucking companies now are starting to understand how to use the data?
They understand it. It brings the logbook down to 5-minute increments instead of 15-minute increments. But for 3 quarters, you suffer a productivity hit. So add to that, say we have an uptick in housing, which is going to pull flatbeds. We're very close to hitting capacity now. And it won't take much of an uptick in the economy or a change in regulation to put us back in the 2006 type of situation where shippers were paying whatever
Right.
whatever was necessary to get a truck when they needed it and keep their freight from sitting on the dock.
Okay, so last year I got a little bit of, went out on a prediction. I said if we see a tightening economy, as we were all hoping, we could see rates go up by as much as 12 to 15% over a 2-year period. If we in fact hit a capacity crisis, are shippers and third parties looking at rate increases of 8 to 10%?
I'll leave the percentages to you.
Okay.
But I can tell you, when there is more freight chasing fewer trucks, prices go up.
Okay. Let's just a couple of other things. Are there any other concerns that you have that shippers and third parties need to be paying attention to as we march off into 2013?
Absolutely. One of the big issues that people are debating right now is CSA, compliance, safety, accountability. I'm learning. And it is a program by FMCSA to help them assess motor carrier safety. Their old program, which was called SafeStat, was a strictly proportional, take if you will, there were 100 motor carriers, and every one of them was perfect. But the agency had determined that it could audit 25 carriers a year. The old system was geared to identify 25 of the 100 carriers to be audited. So even if they were all perfect, 25 of them would have a rating between 75 and 100. That the General Accounting Office said was no good, and the agency took a step back. And they're trying to build an algorithm that gathers all of the data from roadside stops around the country, as well as audits, to develop a safety fitness determination for every motor carrier. Now, at TIA, what we want to see is the FMCSA is the sole agency responsible for licensing and safety determination. We want to see them move to a system where they tell us which carriers are safe, which carriers are unsafe, and remove that uncertainty.